Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the All Me podcast. This is Don Hooten Jr., and today I'll be your host. We started this podcast to help raise awareness about all things appearance and performance-enhancing substances. We've been able to get some of the world's leading experts on anabolic steroids, dietary supplements, energy drinks, and even nutrition. Today, I have a chance to interview a longtime Canadian friend of mine who I met through our years of work with BC Baseball in Canada. Jeff Krushell is an expert in performance and athlete development and couldn't be a more passionate person when it comes to helping young people and even professional athletes get better and perform at their very best. In this episode, he is going to provide you with 5 key performance tips to help separate you from your competition. I'm so glad he was able to take time out of his schedule to share some of his valuable information that he's obtained over the years with us here at the All Me podcast. Please consider making a donation to the Taylor Hooten Foundation to help support our All Me education programs. A big thank you to our partners at Gatorade for sponsoring this episode. Their support makes the All Me podcast a success and has helped us impact thousands of lives around the world. Now let's get to our interview with the master of performance, Jeff Krushell. Mr. Krushell, welcome to the All Me podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. Great work being done over there. Really glad to talk about it all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to you because over the years, you and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other, work together at various conferences. And I was lucky enough to join you on the Crush Performance podcast, which was cool. And now I'm super excited that you're on the All Me podcast today.
Yeah, no little bouncing back and forth. And that's great. The one thing I love about the whole radio podcasting world is you can reach out and talk to people that you just might never meet personally, which is, kind of the fun part. The feedback we get from our podcast, Don, all over the world is pretty incredible. People just looking for ways to get a little bit better. And of course, we're all about just, performance and human performance inside of sport predominantly, but we all know that those performance principles that we study inside of sport, it goes well beyond the borders of sport into everyday life. So, we're getting feedback and listeners all around the world and trying to make a difference. So it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, and it's an amazing avenue to deliver information. In fact, if you would have asked me 2018, 2019, do you listen to podcasts? I'm like, what is that? I've never gotten into them. Now I'm a podcast junkie. So I listen to your podcast. I'm into some true crime stuff. I like, various ones that are on like nutrition and performance, obviously very much like what you do. And that's really what you're an expert in. And you're an expert in talent development and have a lot of knowledge in the world of high performance. So I want to really begin our discussion about what led you into the field of making athletes better.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I've been asked that question before, and I can trace it back for you. I grew up in a small little farming town in northern Canada, and it was kind of an hour and a half outside of Edmonton, Alberta. So we're way, way up north. And, growing up as a kid, it was in one of those small towns where we were lucky enough to have access to great facilities, really good coaches, great volunteer parents. But most importantly, we played every single sport under the sun. Okay. I went on to do my degree at University of Calgary, which was just a great move for me. I didn't know it at the time, but it was a great move for me because it was one of the Canadian Olympic training centers. And I got exposed to a world that I just didn't really know a lot about at the time. And it opened up my eyes to what human performance was all about. I shifted my degree in kinesiology to focus on applied physiology and psychology. And then from there went on to, work with pro hockey teams and football teams, wound up landing with the Blue Jays, and now still working in professional baseball and helping Major League Baseball with their global player development program. But I can tell you this, one of the things that I look back, when I look back on my youth in that small little farming community with the towns around, Don, is there were great players everywhere. And frankly, we just were out there having fun. We didn't have any aspirations of the big leagues. We didn't have any aspirations of Olympics or national teams or any of that stuff. We were just playing for fun. And when I look back at it, in hindsight, I'm going, oh my gosh, there were so many talented kids there. If we'd only known what the possibilities were, maybe some of us might have focused a little bit more on our sporting, opportunities. And that's what's sort of driven me to spread the good word, because, when it comes to talent and talent development, especially in the world of sport, there is an ebb and flow for sure. And, we're just happy to help people now connect the dots. But that's why I'm so passionate about this. I look back to those kids I played with in all those small rural towns. And I'm going, boy, oh boy, there was some serious talent there, and we didn't even know it.
Exactly. And I know how passionate you are just because we've done a lot of work together, especially at the BC Baseball Conference there in British Columbia, Canada. And I've had the opportunity to sit through many of your programs, just like I know you've had an opportunity to sit through ours. And it's just, you can hear your passion coming through your voice and just the way you speak. Obviously, you're very dynamic and you keep the kids' attention because you talk on their level. And obviously, you know what you're talking about. And it's a topic that they're interested in learning. How do I get myself better? It's kind of like you said, it's like we had so much fun as kids, but if we knew kind of what these opportunities could lead us to, maybe going into professional sports or even collegiate sports, maybe we would have focused on something more on our performance and, how to guide that path into upper athletics.
Yeah, no, precisely. And that's what it's all about. So when I travel the world now, and I'm going to tell you right now, working and overseeing a Major League Baseball organization was, man, I can't even tell you what an honor that truly, truly was. And it just sort of happened, man. That wasn't a planned attack either. It's just one thing led to another. I was in pursuit of helping my athletes, and this whole incredible thing happened. And that was a great experience, and just gave me a really, really good perspective in high performance sport. I've been working with NHL teams previous to that, and pro football teams and Olympic athletes. But to get in and run the day-to-day program of a major league club, actually of an entire organization, was incredible. And now in hindsight, the foundation and the framework it's provided me has gone well beyond the sport of baseball, of course, but this whole big picture of long-term development. And then to jump into the global scene with Major League Baseball, like that was another humbling experience, to go to these far reaches of the world and see these incredible athletes coming out of places where sport just really isn't even a major thing. It's more a survival than actually getting involved in pursuing the dream of sport. But it can happen. And I think a lot of people don't realize that process is really tangible, right? It really, truly is, at least to get into it and chase down the dream. We don't know how far any athlete can go, but we do know we can provide a process where they can find out, right?
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback on that, I remember having the opportunity to go down to the Dominican Republic, doing work, the work we do with Major League Baseball and education. And we were invited down there to do information and education programs for their RBI program. And I just remember watching some of these kids between 12 and 16 years old. And you watch, a lot of them throw real hard. Their mechanics are unbelievable. They're fast. And it's almost like watching a big league game, but these are kids. And it's just to see the passion and the love of the game. And just the focus and hard work these young people put in every day. Because I don't think a lot of people realize, and I know you've done work down there, but these kids typically don't get much more than an 8th grade education. So every day they live, eat, and sleep baseball. And it really shows when you watch them perform on the field. Yeah. And there's pros and cons to all of this, right, Don? We sometimes sit back, I do reflect back to my childhood. It was a different age back then. We didn't have social media. We weren't as knowledgeable. We weren't following and tracking all of our players like we can instantly right now. So I think we were a bit blessed back in the day as well, because the pressure wasn't there. And again, not that we didn't have dreams. Like some of the guys, went on to play in the NHL. Some of the guys did go to college, and some of the people went into sports science, and they all chased down something. But there wasn't as much pressure to perform back then.
And I look at the landscape now globally in virtually every single sport, and I wonder if we haven't gone too far sometimes, right? Because there is something to be said for just being a kid.
Right.
I think back often to the way we just went about playing games and getting together with our pals and pick up games and all this thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen a lot anymore.
No.
Everything's so structured and so scheduled in. And there's a lot of pressure on young people today to perform. And
right.
it can backfire. And I think in a lot of ways, if we look at what's happening in the sporting landscape with the dropout rates and the injury rates in sport, we could recalibrate a little bit, I feel.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think today too, kids want to specialize at a young age. And like you said, when I was growing up, and we're about the same age, you would just go out and you'd play in the street. You'd have a tennis ball, you'd have a bat, and whatever sport it was. But now, I mean, by the time you're 7, 8 years old, you're in select sports, and they've got these really intricate tournaments that they're in, and the kids are winning these rings, and they've got these Under Armour, uniforms on. They look amazing, but it's like at that point, is it too far? I don't know. It might be, and I think that's something to be discussed and continue to talk about.
Yeah, it's certainly a passionate discussion over here on our side in the Crush Performance world, because it is an issue for sure. Now, to address specialization, this is an important conversation for athletes, for coaches, teachers, and certainly parents to understand. It's been demonized, right? And there's a lot of reasons that an athlete might specialize in one particular sport. But when we talk about early specialization, I think that's where the big concern comes in. Specializing before the age of 10, I like to say before the age of 12, we like our athletes to play as many sports as possible for as long as possible. But there is certainly a risk you're playing when it comes to specializing your child early in one sport. But also, if you think of the logistics of it all, like there may be reasons that people have to specialize. Like maybe it's economic reasons. If you have 4 kids and you have them all in different sports, man, that adds up in today's day and age, doesn't it? And so there may be reasons that a kid specializes early. Maybe logistically, moving 4 kids around into 5 different, 6 different sports isn't possible, right? But also from the financial side, maybe it's not possible for families to have kids in multiple sports. So here's the upside. Here's what we know now that we've kind of got a handle on it. If you are specialized in one sport, you need to take time away, right? It doesn't mean you have to go play other sports. As a matter of fact, the best thing might be is, as you mentioned, Don, get out on the street with your pals and just go play some fun games that you love, right? Yeah. And so when we talk about early specialization, it's kind of classified as playing one sport for more than 8 months a year. Once you start getting over that eight month, we start seeing a massive increase in injuries and burnout and even anxiety and depression. Yeah. So, be cautious of that year-round approach, but also specializing early may limit the development in just the things you learn from playing other sports. There's a skill transfer that happens between sports, especially early on, that's really, really valuable. And when we look at the numbers, Don, of players, let's say in the NBA or that do get to professional sport, those numbers don't lie. The majority of players in the NCAA, for example, and it's a big number, were multi-sport athletes up to the age of 16 and 17.
You're right. And it's allowing them to work different muscle groups that they might not use in various sports, which, we did a podcast with Major Wright, who ended up playing for the Bears and I believe Tampa. I have to double check that, but that's what he was saying. I mean, he would play football in high school, but then in the off season, he would run track. It kept him in shape. It allowed him to work different muscle groups. And I think that's the important thing, especially for parents to understand is, have your kids play multiple sports because maybe they might, one, obviously injury would be one thing, but two, they might be passionate about a sport that they don't even know about because they've never had an opportunity to play it. And rest, like you had said, rest too. And rest is also super important, especially if you think professional athletes, right? You take an NFL player, a Major League Baseball player, an NHL player, whatever the case might be, they have an off season and they rest. Now, sure, they working out and keeping in shape. Absolutely. But just like the professional athletes rest, we also need our young people to rest as well.
Yeah, no question about it. And you mentioned something very, very, very important there, Don. The fact that, kids, not only will they experience multiple sports, but they'll get to decide which sport, which type of sport they actually love. Like, here's a great story for you. I was lucky enough to work with some of the world's greatest squash players. Okay. And I don't know if anybody's played the game of squash before. I don't know how it's not an Olympic sport, because it is probably one of the most physically demanding sports I've ever seen anywhere. Like, it is an incredible sport. And these guys who are good at this sport are some of the most incredible athletes I've ever worked with in any sport. But I was working with these guys for a number of years, and this one junior player, he came up, he was a Canadian junior national champion, and I think he was ranked in the top 3 or 4 in the world for junior players. And he decided to go to the pro circuit, and he came in at like 200 ranked in the world, and his goal was to get up to the top 10. So we spent the next 5 years getting him into the top 10, and it was just a fantastic ride. We were training one day, and the MLB playoffs were on TV. And he goes, "Man, I loved playing baseball." I said, "Oh, you play baseball, hey?" Because we hadn't really talked about what he'd done before squash. And sure, he played baseball as a kid. He played hockey as a kid and volleyball. I said, "Well, hey, what brought you to squash?" He goes, "Well, and he was lucky enough to play multiple sports when he was a kid. But this is what he said to me, and I still remember this to the very day. He said, I love the team sports, and I miss the camaraderie of being out there battling away. He said, but when we were playing, I just didn't like the fact that my fate was in the hands of other people."
Interesting.
That's what he said. Yeah, it really was interesting. And I did stop for a second to just take it in. He goes, I just really wanted to be responsible for my own outcomes. He goes, that's why I gravitated towards the individual sports, just as an example of what you were saying, So it is important for kids to try sports just from a psychological standpoint, but also from that, you're right, that transfer of physical attributes as well.
Exactly. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Jeff, is what are the basic elements of performance?
Yeah, well, and again, so this is a great question. And I'll tell you how we address this. We've got this sort of crazy, we call it sort of this peak by Friday attitude in society today. We want everything so quick, so right now. We want everything to be perfect, and it's just not realistic. So when we take on a team or an organization or an athlete, we start from scratch. It doesn't matter whether they're 10-year veterans of a professional sport or whether it's a grassroots player just trying to find his way and chase down his dream or her dream. This is the priorities we have when it comes to athlete development. And these are written in stone, okay? And they haven't changed for the last 10 years, though we've added a 5th one, and I'll tell you about that. So number one, when we look at developing athletes and athlete performance, the number one priority is sleep, rest, and recovery. If you haven't taken care of your sleep, if you haven't programmed your annual plan, your monthly plan, your weekly plan, daily plan around quality, rest, and recovery, you're really in an uphill battle. So we make sure that everything is addressed off of quality sleep, quality rest, and quality recovery. If you look at the programs out there, we try to pack in more and more and more work without regards for extra recovery. We just try to survive the recovery side. And that's one of the reasons that we're seeing injuries rise at every single level of sport in every single sport. With everything we know now in sports science and sport performance now, Don, think about that. Injury rates at every level in every sport continue to rise. And it's at a point where, the doctors are calling it, we're on the verge of a sport injury pandemic. It's crazy. It's simply because we're mismanaging the workloads. We're not recovering enough. The body can do tremendous amounts of work. So it's not so much that we're overworking, we're just under recovering. So every program that we build is based on quality sleep, quality rest, quality recovery. And then number 2, nutrition and hydration. We could talk all day about that, but listen, 2 things. Never get hungry, never get thirsty. Our athletes eat often, and we try to stabilize blood sugar in that 24-hour period and blood chemistry in that 24-hour period, whether it's a competitive season or the off season. And hydration, for people who are listening, is probably the lowest hanging fruit in boosting your performance right now and your recovery. Very few athletes at any level of sport are truly hydrating properly. We're learning more and more about it even today. but it's one of the lowest hanging fruits. So number 1, sleep, rest, and recovery. Number 2, nutrition, hydration. Number 3, for our athletes, posture and range of motion. Listen, if this body isn't set up to function properly, you're up against it. And I can tell you a quick story of how I fell into that. This was in my university years. One of my roommates at university was a golf pro, right?
Okay.
And he was a great golfer. Now, I never really played golf. We hit the ball around once in a while, but I never got really good at golf. So one day, and get this, so he is the assistant golf pro at Banff Springs Golf Course, which is one of the most beautiful golf courses in the world. And of course, I was doing my degree in Calgary, so it's just an hour outside the city. So one day he goes, "Hey Jeff, I'm going out with the head pro and one of our members at 2:00. You want to come along?" I go, "Yeah, the golf Banff Springs, you better believe it." So we get out there, Don, and this is a great funny story. We get out there, and I'm there with 3 of the best golfers on the course. So the head pro gets up there and he tees away, and he goes, "Listen, we got to get out by 2:00 because there's a big tour group coming in, and they're teeing off at 2:15." And so, wouldn't you know it, we're waiting on the tee, and then these 2 big buses roll in, and everybody's gathering, got their equipment. They're gathering around the tee box, and they're watching the head pro and the assistant pro tee off, right? Oh, man. Just imagine the picture. It's beautiful Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful day, and the head pro, he hits the ball, boom, it goes, I don't even know, straight down the fairway. It's a beautiful shot. Everybody's clapping, right? It's like the Masters gallery.
Yeah.
And then Bob gets up there. He hits his ball. Boom. Beautiful. Just beautiful shot. And then I can't remember the name of the member, but it's one of their lifelong members. He hits the ball, and he's a scratch golfer. And then I get up there, right? And I hit this ball, and I wind up. And I'm athletic, right? So I'm going to, no problem. And I'm not going to lie to you. There's I think maybe 100 people watching. I'm a little nervous. I go to hit the ball, and it's just 3 feet off the ground. It hooks right and hits an elk right in the rump. Boom. About 50 meters up, hits an elk right in the butt, and it drops straight down, and everybody's just howling. The crazy thing was, the elk didn't even lift his head when the ball hit his butt.
What?
So I'm standing there embarrassed that everybody's laughing and having a good time at my expense. But here's the thing. We hop into the carts, and we're going out there to get my ball, which was another just comical theatrics because it was an inch from this elk's hoof. So I'm trying to get this ball out to my drop. But here's the thing. I'm riding in the cart with Bob, and I go, "Bob, how is it possible? I'm so terrible at golf, man. I exercise, I'm in shape, I play sports." And this is what he said to me, though, Don, and this has resonated with me for years and years and years and years. He says, "Listen, man, you're done before you start." I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Your setup is so wrong, you don't have a chance of hitting that ball straight." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, the way you grip the club, the way you're holding the club in relationship to your body, the ball's position in your feet." He says, "Everything is wrong." And I took that in, and we had a great round. This is a fun round. But that conversation really set the tone for me, helping hundreds, if not thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes. If your posture, think of your posture as your setup. If your posture isn't set up properly, man, you're in trouble before you get going. We know what a true posture is, and we don't have to have a perfect posture, but especially in one-sided sports like golf, baseball, tennis, we see it in our hockey players and our curlers. We see it anytime there's a one-sidedness to sport. You can get lopsided really, really quick. And when it gets beyond a certain point of a neutral posture, increased risk of injury and certainly decreased performance. So posture and range of motion turns out to be our number 3 priority before we even pick up a ball, glove, bat, touch the ice or the court. These things have to be addressed. And then number 4, we address movement. Teach our athletes to move, because outside of sport, a lot of these athletes are very limited in what they can do. Those limited movement skills limit their ability to perform inside of their sport. I don't care what it is. And then last year on our radio show, Don, and we've had you on the show before, of course, but last year we had 2 major themes: talent ID, which is a conversation that was just tremendous. And the second was the Crush brain game. And I've been a huge proponent of psychology and the mental side of sport for years and years. It was kind of my minor in university. And one of the things that we don't do well is address that beforehand. We're not proactive when it comes to mental health and mental strategies, even mental clarity for sport performance. We're very reactive, right? Mm-hmm. So I started revisiting this thing that I called the brain game. What exactly is the brain game? How does it fall into the hierarchy of sport performance? Because we have been so reactive in the past. Well, we now have 5 priorities that we address. The newest one is the Krushell brain game, the brain game. And some athletes need it, some athletes don't. But before we even start working with an organization, a team, or an athlete, we address where that athlete is in terms of anxiety levels and depression and coping mechanisms and hassle scores. And listen, the thing that really spurred this on, Major League Baseball asked me to speak at winter meetings in 2018 to address exactly this, recovery, regeneration, because the injury rates at Major League Baseball have been continuing to rise for years and years and years. In minor league baseball, they're even worse. Now, here's the thing to note. In baseball, those injuries, they're not just happening when these guys get the professional ball. These are injuries of like a powder keg. They're probably happening when these kids are when these players were 12, 13, 15 years of age. They're just getting to a point where they break. Okay, in the pressure of high-performance sport. But one of the speakers before me was one of the medical doctors in Major League Baseball in Las Vegas at the winter meeting. So I listened to every speaker. And they were talking about the top 10 reasons for injuries in their sport because they're trying to get a handle on this epidemic of injuries and how to offset it. And they're counting them down, things you might think about, sliding head first and getting hit with a ball and, hamstrings, whatever. There's a bunch of them. But when they got to number 5, the number 5 reason for injuries in baseball is anxiety. And
really?
And again, that was another one of those. Yeah, it was another one of those just stopping moments. I'm going, hold on, pardon. What? Pause for a second. What did you just say? And I'm looking at the guys from the Braves over there, and I'm looking at the guys from the Blue Jays over there, and I'm looking at them. They're looking at me, and I'm going, what did he just say? Anxiety? How can anxiety be the 5th reason for injuries in sport? And again, that was 2018, and that just took my whole attitude towards the brain game to a whole new level. We attacked it with a vengeance because you think about it, anxiety in sport at the professional level, we know it's there, but we haven't armed our athletes with the tools they need to deal with it. You can turn anxiety into a huge weapon if you know how. So the brain game has become our 5th priority. Sorry for the long-winded response, but I'm just so adamant. Well, listen, we're so off track when it comes to athlete development at the professional level, but more importantly at the youth level. We're not addressing any of these things properly. Right. And until we do so, we're really not going to change the tide out there of injuries, dropout, burnout, and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, especially right now as we're recording, it's May, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think as a society, we're doing a better job of actually, discussing mental health and being more open about it. But there is a lot of demand on these athletes. In fact, we're going to be launching a podcast specifically about mental health and athletes and how really that affects them, which is really interesting. And I'm looking forward to listening to it. But you had mentioned a couple other things. One, the hydration piece, and a lot of people don't understand how important that is. And as it turns out, Jeff, our podcast sponsors Gatorade. So we actually interviewed a couple of their experts from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute to talk about hydration and the importance, because a lot of people think, I'll have a couple things of water and to get prepared for the game, but it's an all-day preparation, right? It's also post recovery. It's great to continue to keep fluids in our body, and it's very important. It helps performance. A lot of people don't think about that. They just think, well, I'm thirsty during the game. I'll have something to drink. But like you said in the very beginning of the podcast, we can't wait till we're thirsty or we can't wait till we're hungry. But the other one I'm really glad that you had mentioned and even dove into, and I have a couple of questions for you on it, is sleep, because sleep is so important, especially in today's active lifestyle, especially with our young people. They have access to these smart devices and streaming videos and social media and all these sorts of things that can distract us and keep us up late at night. And you had mentioned how important sleep is. In fact, Jeff, one of the podcasts we did was with Dr. Singh. It's, I believe, episode 13 of our podcast. And it's one of our most downloaded podcasts we have because a lot of people are really intrigued by sleep. And it's something that I know from a personal standpoint, I'm a horrible sleeper. And I know I get miserable if I go 3, 4, 5 nights without sleep. And then you get that really, really good night of sleep, and you just feel like a new person the next day. When you're talking with parents and young athletes as it relates to sleep, what sort of tips are you offering them? What can people do that are listening to help better that sleep, especially for our young athletes?
Yeah, no, such an important conversation. And again, another reason, it's our number one priority. If you're not sleeping well, or if you don't have sleep strategies, it's very, very difficult to really perform at your best. Whether you're on the construction site, whether you're a first responder, in the military, whether you're, in court as a lawyer or an accountant, doesn't matter what your area of expertise is, certainly in sport performance. If you're not sleeping well, you are not performing well. It's just inescapable. So, when we look at taking on an athlete or a team or an organization, Don, one of the first things we do is we just look at the sleep patterns, right? So we try to get a sleep log done, and we like to do it for 7 days. And it's just a simple tracking of your sleep. And not the sleep watches. The sleep technology is very, very misleading, and it can actually be very, very distracting. We could talk about that later. But what we really like to do is we like to get people and our athletes understanding what great sleep feels like. So we get them to log, hey, when do you go to sleep? Did you wake up during the night? How long were you awake? When did you go back to sleep? And then how do you feel in the morning? Oh, do you feel great? Do you feel terrible? In a scale of 1 to 10. And over the course of 7 days, you can get a really good feel for a person's sleep habits. And that's a very important word here, habits. We need to spend more time programming in and taking care of our sleep. It is, again, the number one priority in sport performance, but in human performance. So the first thing we talk about is consistency, Don. So we like to have a wake-up time, especially if we get into these routines that we have, right? Have a wake-up time and stick to it. If you find that for some reason one night you didn't get a great sleep, don't worry about it. Remember, our bodies, our cycles work on a 24-hour cycle. So what we do, Don, is we say, okay, how much sleep does a particular person need? How much sleep does Don need? Don, let's say you're one of those guys that needs 8 hours a night. Okay.
That's
I'm
me.
kind of an 8 hour a night guy.
That's
Some people are 6. Like, do you know what you're at?
Yeah, I'm probably, if I can get 8, I'm good. If I can get a solid 6, I'm okay. But anything 8 plus is good. And that's hard to do, Jeff, because if I go to sleep at midnight. By 4:35, my body starts waking up. But by 6 a.m., I'm wide awake.
Yeah, and that's pretty common too, right? And that's fine. Like, here's the thing. You just got to know. A lot of people can have a great day on 6 hours of sleep. Mm-hmm. What we do, though, is we try to block it over a period of time. Because, maybe your flight is delayed, or the bus breaks down, or you get into overtime, or there's extra innings, or whatever reason, you have to work late. So there might be a night, or maybe the baby's crying, whatever, who knows? But there's a reason maybe you didn't get a great night's sleep. Do not fret. What we do is we block it in 7-day blocks. We go, okay, look, if you need, let's say, 8 hours of sleep a night for 7 days, we know that we're shooting for around 56 hours of sleep over the course of the week. Now, if you have a night where you don't get great sleep, don't fret the next day. It's not the end of the world. You can actually perform quite well when there's one night, maybe 2 nights of restless, not great sleep. You start getting 3 or 4 days, that's when we start getting into a deficit, right? And we've got to make that up. So we set up really strong wake-up times, and we work backwards from there, okay? We don't like people staying up late and then sleeping in. Solid, hard wake-up time is really, really important when we talk about sleep and sleep performance. So that's number one. Number 2, if you don't get a great sleep, let's plan in a makeup. Go to bed earlier the next night, or nap. Find a time to nap. And you'll see some of the top companies in the world, Google and Apple, Microsoft of the world, they actually have nap rooms now because they know a 15, 20-minute nap mid-afternoon can be really, really helpful for not just performance, but also safety of the employees, right? Very, very important. And you're seeing nap rooms in every single professional clubhouse now. It's just a standard procedure. Sleep like a pro is what we talk about. And, I was just down consulting with a major league team, and we're talking about sleep, and just before the season started. And some of the guys, we're in the batting cage later in the day just talking about it, and the guys went, oh, man, if I ever got caught sleeping in the clubhouse, man, the guys, I'd never hear the end of it. I said, no. We have to change that attitude, man. You've got to sleep like a pro. In order to play like a pro, you better sleep like a pro, man, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of solid sleep times, scheduling in naps and being okay with naps, learning how to nap, but then also creating a sleep environment, cool,
Yes.
dark, and at nighttime, low floor lit lighting, not overhead lighting coming down, but from the ground up type lighting. And then you said one of the magical things, learn how to separate yourself from your technology. It's okay to watch some TV and stuff. It might even be okay to check your texts or your emails before you go to bed, but you can't be on your phone texting, sending notes, or playing Candy Crush till 3 a.m. or League of Legends or whatever it might be. And the light does impact how our body's chemistry works for sleep, but probably more importantly for that is the brain activity. Actually, sending messages or playing a game really fires up the brain, and it's not conducive to sleep. So those are some of the early on sort of hints that we have, but it's just a critical part of not just performance, Don, but overall health. All right.
Yeah.
We know that every single disease of our elderly is directly related to lack of deep sleep. And that's an indication of just habit forming. So if you're looking to have a longer, healthier life, take care of your sleep. If you want to perform better, sleep like a pro, baby.
Exactly. So when it comes to these 5 elements, is it something, and this is going to be kind of a 2-part question, but is it something that we all possess? And I know anything we do in life, we have to constantly work at it to get better, right? You always are trying to get better. So that being number one, do we possess all these things? How much do we need to work on it? But the other thing is let's say, you take a professional athlete, and if you've been around, let's take like a Clayton Kershaw or somebody like that, constantly mastering their craft, constantly working on these things. So he's obviously has figured out these elements of performance. But have you noticed, can you notice, like, let's say in a young athlete that maybe they just have that God-given talent, but do you see that they've also mastered at a younger age these 5 elements of performance that make them perform maybe better than their competitors? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, no, it totally makes sense, and it's absolutely true. I mean, whether it's just circumstance, there is a genetic factor here. We know just in terms of simple muscle type fibering, right? Like genetics. We talk about the nervous system's greatly influenced by genetics. The brain and brain functions greatly influenced by genetics. But what we do know, regardless of all of that, is if you have experiences through the developmental timeline that are really, really meaningful, we can raise that ceiling of performance. We can raise that ceiling of potential, per se. So when you talk about like a person and a pro like Kershaw, if we were to sit down with a player like that, 10-year veteran, like a seasoned veteran, one of the greatest players, one of our top priorities there would be injury prevention. How do we keep this thing going as long as humanly possible at the highest level possible? And then inside of there, I guarantee every one of those guys is still looking for an edge to get better, even if they're on the decline, right? Some of these guys in the decline. So take a player like Joey Votto, for example, one of the great Canadian players, one of the great Major League Baseball players, Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer for sure. But a great conversation that I heard with Joey Votto here over the last couple of years is how he is analyzing hitters as they go through their careers, as they're getting closer to the end of their careers, because he's not now able to do what he did when he was younger. So he is looking for ways to adapt and change and manipulate his swing so he can compete at the level he's at right now. And that's what I'm talking about, just digging for these opportunities, regardless of what level you're at. Do we all have the potential for this? Yes, without question. This is accessible. Everybody can do it. You just have to learn how. It's kind of like maybe learning a new language or learning how to play an instrument, right? I mean, honestly, there are processes that you can learn, but it's accessible and it's there for everybody. Every one of those five components of performance. But also, remember, nobody does it alone. So at some point, you're going to have to seek out that help, seek out some expertise, and that's what makes the world go round.
So what would you say, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but what would you say would be like the number one reason people aren't able to perform at the top level? Is it mental?
Well,
is it a physical? Yeah.
Right. No. Hey, Don, that is a great question. Like, I'm so proud of what you guys do, and one of the things that I've prided myself in long before you and I even met, I think that's why I've resonated with you guys so well, is I've been I've been like anti-doping from day one. I think it's because early in my career, I saw athletes' health decline. I've seen deaths related to the use of black market steroids and performance enhancing drugs. And it rocked me to my core to see. And when I sit back and reflect on that, at the time, these athletes who were just great people, I'm going, why? Why on earth?
Yeah.
You know why? Because they did not know what to do. They did not know what to do. So, for these performers that aren't performing, it's more to do with the fact that they don't know what to do or how to do it. So they start looking for shortcuts, and there are no shortcuts. Rock solid foundation and build on it. We don't know. And again, I have to say this again. Don't let anybody tell you how good I don't care what level of sport you play or what sport you are involved in. Never let anybody tell you you can't do it, right? Because they don't know. What we know about talent and talent ID and talent development, we don't know what we're doing. That's what we do know. There's one thing that I'm confident in saying when it comes to talent and talent identification, we are horrific at it collectively across the board. So never let anybody tell you what you can or can't do. And number two, be very, very weary of people who tell you can, all right? Here's what we do know. We know that if the process is there, and if you go through a great process, we will find out. We will find out at the end of the day where you can go with it all. But you got to have that process in place. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. And one of the things that you said that there are no shortcuts, even if you have these 5 elements mastered, and there are athletes out there that have, and there are big name athletes out there that have been busted for doping. And when it comes to our young people, they just feel this immense amount of pressure, to perform at the next level. And one of the things you said that really just stuck with me is don't ever let somebody tell you you're not good enough, that you don't have the talent, because words are powerful. Words are things that will stick with you the rest of your life. And one of the things I always try to draw conclusions with, especially as adults when we talk with them, is when you tell a young person they need to change their physical appearance. You need to lose weight. You need to get bigger. You need to get stronger. You need to get faster. And you have those adults think back to at some point in their life, somebody told them they needed to change their physical appearance. And I was like, just think about that. So 30 or 40 years, you still remember that person telling you that. Words are powerful, especially with our young kids today. They're growing up in a different world. You tell a young person you need to get bigger, stronger, faster, or even lose weight, male, female, athlete, non-athlete, it doesn't matter. They have powerful tools at their hands. If they are not guided, just like you keep talking about knowledge and getting back to the basics, and they don't know, they're going to try and educate themselves. And there are a lot of bad people out there giving them poor information. Even, you hear about professional athletes still testing positive. Many of these guys and gals, they're still kids. So they're being influenced by others to go out and buy these black market steroids, like, as you said, extremely dangerous. You have no idea what it is you're putting into your body. And again, there's no shortcuts. So taking whatever drug or supplement's not going to make you a better athlete or separate you from your competition, if you will.
No, it really doesn't. And that's exacerbated again if you don't have the foundational pieces in place, right? There's no shortcuts at all. And we know, again, getting back to it, we know why people might choose to go to the dark side or take that shortcut. And it comes down to the fact that they don't know what else to do. A lot of the times, they don't know what else to do. Now, there's the nefarious part where they're doing it to get a leg up and be a little better. But I'm telling you right now, we have worked with athletes who have been on drugs. We've gotten them off drugs. We've tested them and make sure they're off drugs. And we have gotten results in training that supersede and exceed anything they ever dreamed of getting from using a banned substance. So, when the body is managed properly with very, very specific goals and objectives over developmental time, it is absolutely incredible what can be done. But you have to kind of know what that is. It all starts, though, Don, with those 5 things. If you're sleeping well, and you're resting and recovering well, and there's strategies for rest and recovery, okay? And all that revolves around programming your work. The amount of work you program in, the training, the competition, should all revolve around the amount of quality rest, recovery and sleep you have. That's why it's our number one priority. If you're eating and hydrating properly, you can drive the body to new levels, and you can eat specifically for certain types of gains and objectives. That's easy to do if you know how. And then if the body's lined up and balanced properly so you can pursue your training and your competition without worries of injury and maximizing movement skills, then you're getting somewhere. And so, I understand why it can be so frustrating, because it's not an easy thing to comprehend, especially if you don't know about this stuff. So here's a strong message, and I know this is what you guys at the foundation are all about, is, hey, listen, there are ways to do it. And we can, there's not a lot we can't do. Like, we have a genetic makeup, right? And again, we will find out what your potential is as long as we have the process in place.
Exactly. So a couple questions that come to my mind as you're talking. We keep talking about knowledge, and if you're able to learn this stuff, I mean, it could help you become a better athlete, but also a better human being. So how do I learn, and where would I go to get this information?
Yeah, and it's tough. And that's another thing that's very, very difficult. And that's one of the things I love about the podcast. Like, there are a lot of great podcasts out there in sport by sport. There are great experts out there too on YouTube sharing things. But here's the thing you have to be cautious about with those things as well. Because as with the greatest of intentions, you have all these experts sharing exercises and throwing out ideas. But is that right for that particular person, depending on where they're at in their development, depending what they need, so you have to be cautious with that. My strongest recommendation is, if you're an athlete, or if you have a young athlete, start listening to podcasts like the All Me podcast or our podcast. That's what we're all about. The Crush Performance podcast is about the science of human development. We've got shows that go back 16 years talking about this stuff with some of the greatest experts around the world, just for context. And then in your community, seek out somebody to get some help. Listen, man, you have music instructors, you've got, tutors, you've got all these people in your communities, swimming instructors. Go find a great strength and conditioning coach that has a background in athlete development, and get some sessions with them. Start talking to them, man. Look for NSCA certification, National Strength and Conditioning Association certification, probably in the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, CSCS. So look for those accreditations to make sure the people you're working with really, really know what they're talking about. But there's great people in the communities all over the place. And honestly, I get hundreds of emails asking for help, and there's not one we don't answer. So there's great people out there that are willing to help, and don't think you have to do it alone. But here's what I say, Don, and I've said this to every athlete group that I've worked with. And I think I've shared this story with you before. When I get a group of athletes, I'll take them aside with nobody else around, and I'll just have a little conversation with them. And I'll make 3 simple statements. I said, hey, listen, guys, if you're using some kind of banned substance, just, hey, let me know. Attorney-client privilege. Because if something, God forbid, goes wrong on the field of competition, that, you pass out or something terrible happens, we'll at least have a starting point to know what's going on. Number 2, if you have used in the past, let me know. Just in case something does happen, we have a reference point. Again, attorney-client privilege. And then number 3, if you're thinking about using, come and talk to me, and beware, I am going to talk you out of it, because you don't need to go there. We can get unbelievable results, okay? Depending on where you're at over timeline. And that has been a powerful conversation. You wouldn't believe the number of athletes who have engaged from that conversation after the fact. And boy, I think it's helped a lot of people. But that's a conversation I would have with anybody involved in sport today.
And that's what I always tell adult influencers. It's like, just ask the question. This is, I can't tell you how many times we've been told after a program, Jeff, that it's like, oh, I can't believe our kids were engaged for that long. How did you guys do that? Well, we have a good program, but beyond the good program, it's information these kids are starving for. They're talking about it. They're interested. It's a very popular topic, especially in the fitness and nutrition world. So again, getting that information. And I want to talk about the Krush podcast just because it's something I listen to. You've had a lot of great experts on. You do a really good job producing it, everything from the music intro in the beginning to just the sound quality of the whole thing. But you're also putting them out once a week, which I know is a lot of work. So you have a ton of content. And Jeff, what I'll also do is I'll be sure to put a link in the show notes so anybody listening can locate where your podcast is and your website as well to find you as a resource.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. It's just all about, sort of the idea behind our show. And again, I had no intentions of ever getting into radio. I started on the radio network, like the TSN radio sports radio network. I had no intentions, but when I was done with the Blue Jays, we moved back home, and the local sports station had me on. They wanted to find out, hey, what goes on behind the curtains in Major League Baseball, right? And I was more than happy to share. And after the second or third time I was on, we were just talking about, what we do with the pitchers on a weekly basis and how we get our starting pitchers, to be some of the best in the world, and the Cy Young Awards and all this stuff we were involved in. And the program director came up to me after the show. He says, hey, listen, man, I don't know. He goes, but we have never, ever had an audience response to a guest like we've got with you. People want to know this stuff. Have you ever thought about doing a show? I'm going, what? A show? A show on this stuff? What are you talking about? So sure as heck, man, we started this little show. It was like a Wayne's World episode of the show. It was like at 6:30 Sunday morning, or we started. But now we're into our 16th year on terrestrial radio, and the podcast is now 12 years old. And man, oh man, it is actually rewarding. Yes, it's once a week, and we have annual themes this year for 2022. Our overall theme is organizational and team performance, which is a big piece of pie to bite into. But it's sort of tied in nicely to all the other conversations revolving around, our Krush war on sugar and nutrition, hydration, sleep science. And then, of course, the current story, the start of the Major League Baseball season, the NHL playoffs, the NFL draft. What are the players doing to be their best in the world? Just lots of great fun stuff. And the great thing is, just being around all these incredible people from around the world in sports science, and they want to share their information. It's just so much fun.
I love it. Yeah. And what I'll do, like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes so people can tune in. You can scroll through. There's tons and tons of content to listen to. And you're a lot of fun to listen to as well. You're animated. And again, that just goes back to, as we were talking before, having seen you present, you're extremely passionate about this topic. You know what you're talking about. And it's important for you to educate others of how to be a better person.
Yeah, no, I really do appreciate that, Don. Yeah, our sort of our mandate is, if we look at our mission statement, we've got three sort of words we're pretty passionate about: inspire, motivate, and educate. And if we do that on a weekly basis, we're really achieving our goals here. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I know your time's important, but for those of you that tune into the All Me podcast, you know that one of our most important parts of the podcast is what we call our curveball question section. So what I've done, Jeff, is I put together 3 questions. They have nothing to do with Krush performance, strength conditioning, and they're a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you these questions. Just the first thing that comes to mind, spit out the answers. Does that make sense?
You got it. Yeah, I've heard it. And I love it.
All right, perfect. So the first question I have for you, the zombie apocalypse is coming. Who are 3 people that you want on your team?
My mom, Noah Syndergaard, and probably Batman, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, those are my 3.
So that's a very interesting selection. You've got the whole gamut of people. In fact, I got to meet Noah Syndergaard. We had a clay shooting tournament here in Dallas. And he came with Dylan G., who was one of our All Me advisory board members. What a really big guy. Really big guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
He's a great character too. I follow him on Twitter. Yeah. And somebody the other day on Twitter, I don't spend a lot of time on social media, but you get these little alerts, and Noah Syndergaard said, okay, maybe not the best life advice, but okay. Somebody said, hey, I'm going to throw down with Noah Syndergaard. And Noah responds with a funny response, but just a really good dude. But the thing I like about Noah Syndergaard is his focus and his determination. And he's going to be a fun one to watch, especially coming back from that injury. So
yes. And you talk about somebody that has their fitness and nutrition program down. I follow him on social media as well. That's a guy to follow. I mean, he is constantly working hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Question number 2. What is your most favorite item that you've bought this year?
Ooh, favorite item I bought? Oh, without question. Oh my goodness. All right. So, and it wasn't really for me, but for my wife's birthday, we bought a wood fire pizza oven. Oh my goodness. Stop the press. It is incredible, man. That is, I tell you what, that is without question my favorite purchase of this year so far. So the wood fire pizza oven for my wife's birthday.
All right. Next time I'm up there, I know where I'm coming for dinner.
Oh, it's like you're back in Italy, my friends. That's what
I love wood-fired pizza. That's one of my cheat meals. Okay, so final question. This is a really neat one. When you die, what do you want to be remembered for?
Yeah, that is a great one. And I think it would be for sharing knowledge. That would be probably the greatest honor I could maybe pass on. If I could be known for sharing knowledge and helping people out, that would be it for sure.
Well, good. And you're the perfect guy to do it. And again, Jeff, thank you so much for taking your time. I was really looking forward to this conversation. One, because we're good buddies and I hadn't had a chance to talk with you in a while, but you also are a wealth of information and really passionate about what you do. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend on the All Me podcast.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I hope to do it again soon, Don.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.